Thanks, everybody, and welcome to the Board of Trustees meeting for the Internet Society Board of Trustees. This is Saturday, November 13th, at least in UTC Samsung. We have one apology today from Maimuna, who was not able to join us. Are there any conflicts to declare? Okay, hearing no conflicts, the first order of business is to recognize new chapters which have been recently chartered. There are 3 to recognize today, and the resolution reads as follows. Resolved that the ISOC Board of Trustees warmly welcomes the Internet Society Canada Manitoba chapter, the Internet Society Poland chapter, and the Internet Society Ukraine chapter. I'd like to do this by acclamation, so if you would signify your acclaim by clapping. Thanks very much, and we very much welcome each of these chapters to the Internet Society. We also extend our congratulations to the presidents and other officers of the new chapters. The next order of business is the President and CEO's report. Andrew?
Thank you. And Kevin, I think you have some slides. This has shrunk. Yep. Thanks very much. So I am Andrew Sullivan, and I guess all of you know that, but in case anybody's watching, and this is the presentation of our 2021 action plan, the progress so far. Next, please. So as you will recall, we categorize our projects into one of 2 categories, either internet around growing the internet or around strengthening the internet. These are about the internet growth projects. Next, please. The first of these is building community networks, and since these are up, I will not go through all of the detailed things here. You probably don't want me to read you a table in this presentation, but I want to draw a few highlights. The basic issue with community networks involves a couple of different things. One, that we need to make sure that we're engaging with the communities who develop these networks, and then also the regulatory environment. So whether countries permit them, whether there are appropriate uses of bandwidth and so forth for the countries in question. And I'm pleased to say we've had quite a few new community networks that have been deployed. So we've already achieved the status for the year. We've also achieved we've made good progress and made our number for the countries and organizations that have changed the policies and regulations. This was a big hurdle, so this actually should improve our capacity to be able to do this in the future. Next slide, please. The other part about this, of course, is ensuring that the community is in good shape and capable of doing these things. You can't have a community network without the community, and so we try to make sure that that we support people in that. There's a lot of training that is within most of this presentation, and that, of course, is in keeping with the focus on training that we've been doing over the last couple of years. So we've met our aim for individuals trained for the year. There is a program going to run in Q4 having to do with community leaders and their promotion and so on. That happens in Q4, so it hasn't really happened yet. And we've got new partners that are helping us in this effort as well. Next, please. The next topic is a sort of two-faced topic. One having to do with fostering infrastructure, primarily internet exchange points, and then ensuring that the community is there to develop that and continue to develop those IXPs. We had a target of 5 IXPs for the year, 5 new ones, and also improving 15 existing ones. We're almost there with the new ones, and we've already achieved the level for the existing ones, so that's very good. we also intended to find new and existing partnerships. We were aiming at 5. We've had lots of support there, so we're well past our goal for the year. Next, please. The development of the community is also not only on track, it's really exceeding its goals, and this will be reflected, of course, in next year's goals, where we will reach a little higher this time around. So we were hoping for 500 people to take the network operations training. We I mean, we just completely blew through it, and we've got lots and lots of people who are very interested in this. This has been a very successful training effort, and I think it's one of the signal achievements for the year. We've also got countries who are engaged through policy changes and so on, and there again, the long-term efforts are really starting to pay off. Countries are coming around to the idea, oh, actually, this is a way to save us money and to create an environment within our country that is positive. So that's what we're seeing. That's what we're seeing within that area. Next, please. Finally, we've got in this area, we've got this project around measuring the internet. The goal of this project, this is sort of the first really big year for this, and the goal of this is really to be a clearinghouse for other measurement efforts. There's a lot of measurement efforts around the internet. They're fragmented, and the goal here is to sort of consolidate them in a way that is useful. So the aims were modest, but I think we've had positive effects. We had 3 new partnerships. We did manage to get 3 new partnerships. We're hoping for another one, so we'll have more kinds of data and a wider variety of data. Similarly, we've got some new focus areas. We're about to launch these new focus areas. They should be coming before the end of the year, so that's on track. Next, please. Now we'll move on to the strengthening the internet portfolio. Next, please. The first of these, of course, is the internet way of networking, which you've all heard about. This is the focus here, of course, is to develop a clear way of describing and thinking about what is different, what is distinct about building networks along the lines of the internet as opposed to other kinds of networks. There are lots of ways to develop networks, but this one is the internet way, and that's what it is that we're focused on here. So we've been working hard to make sure that other people understand this technique and this tool. We aimed to have some external entities pick this up. We were aiming for 5. We've had 3 so far. So we think that we're going to have some positive results there by the end of the year. But we have had people in the policymaking and the ISOC community working through the Internet Way training course. We've exceeded our target for the year, and I think that's very good news, because we really want this to become a building block for the way we talk about network development more generally. Next, please. Encryption has been a hot topic for us this year. This is the Q3 numbers, and you will see that some of these look a little low. This is, of course, because the Global Encryption Day has just happened, and so all of the big numbers are really going to show up after this. We've nevertheless had some very, very good results. We've had a really positive engagement with the Global Encryption Coalition. Why can't I spit that out today? We've had many more people pick that up than we were hoping. I guess not hugely large numbers, but we've got some more that are coming as well. We've also had a lot of people take the training around this. It's a very, very popular training course, and I think that what we're seeing is people are understanding. Actually, there's a lot of subtlety to this. I'm particularly pleased to point out on this row that we've got journalists and other kinds of people who are I think hungry for this kind of information, and so this is a way in which the Internet Society is really taking this message to the wider audience in the world and not just our own community. The Global Encryption Coalition events and so on. This, of course, we were aiming for 1 million people, but as I said, it's just happened. Next, please. Securing global routing, this is really the Manners effort. And as you know, what we were aiming here was to really increase the route origin authorization uptake. what we've seen is that we were aiming for 10%. We've already exceeded that. We've got like 15% increase since January. So I think that that's a really great result. This is a critical piece of the internet infrastructure. We've got some work going on around the existing Manners participants implementing origin validation. So, there are really two parts to this, right? You've got to announce your authorization and you've got to do validation. And the validation part is still a little bit delayed. It turns out that this measurement is very, very hard to make. And that's actually where the problem is here. We committed to this measurement, and now it turns out we're not really sure how that yardstick works. So I'm a little bit concerned about that, but we're gonna give it a try anyway. There seems to be a comment in the chat.
Just a minor comment about metrics on the row side.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. Well, we'll look into that. Next, please. We also are looking. One of the things that has been a big important feature of Manners is to show actually people join Manners and they get better. So they're getting benefit out of it for their own network, because that, of course, gives you a reason to continue convincing other people to come along. And so what we've been trying to see is, okay, people are joining. We look back 3 months because we know they're coming. We look back 3 months, and then we look 3 months after they join, and we say, hey, was this an improvement? We've been aiming for a 30% improvement. It's actually turned out to be harder to achieve this than we thought, because it appears that when people think, oh, maybe we'll join Manners, they start making improvements before we have a chance to look at them. And so this is, it's good news. It's just that maybe the measure is not very good. So we may actually have to adapt that measure in a different way, or decide, actually, this isn't a thing that can be measured very usefully. Finally, you will recall that Manners was always intended to be a sort of community driven effort, that the Internet Society shouldn't actually operate this forever, but should instead prepare the community to take it over. And the community has been getting ready to do that. So there's been a steering committee election procedure, and in fact, the election has been going on. So it's good news. I think that is going to be ready probably for next year. Next, please. We also had in the action plan a bunch of efforts around empowering people to take action. This is really community focused stuff. So that's what this is about. Next, please. The first half of this is community participation, direct participation, particularly among chapters, but also other parts of our community. Next, please. The first piece here has really been around individual members and trying to make sure that we understand these things. And I think you will all be aware that historically our attention to individual members has been perhaps a little weaker than it should have been. And so this year is really a baseline year where we're developing that in order to say, okay, well, in future years, do we get an improvement? What we've been doing here is trying to figure out how many individual members are participating in our events. We aimed at 5,000. That was a number picked out of thin air because, as I said, this was a baseline year. Nevertheless, we have exceeded it. Next, please. There we go. So we've got special interest groups. You will recall that the special interest groups were in this awkward situation. They were treated very much like chapters, but they didn't have the function that worked like chapters. And most importantly, because they weren't geographically constrained, it was often very difficult for a given special interest group to figure out where they could have a bank account and so on. And that tended to make things very, very difficult. So we came up with, in consultation with the SIG community, we came up with an alternative plan for a structure and so on. That has been rolling its way out. The new structure is in place. We're we're on track for that. And we had to pick 5 topics. We got the 5 topics. There was a protracted discussion about that. But I think that, while not everybody is happy, I think this is working. Next, please. Finally, we're going to establish the sort of baseline number this year for people who participate in the consultation. So the SIG consultation is going to happen under the new process every 2 years. So this year was the baseline year. We've got the baseline number, so this is prepared. And so then in 2 years, not in 2022, but in 2023, we'll have another consultation around this. And this will form the basis for that. So this is done, but there isn't, there's not a lot to report about it this year. Next, please. The next part of this has to do with community participation. This is this has been a topic I know that this board has taken up very often. So these are some numbers that that we have, but unfortunately, we don't really have much in the way of numbers here. So the big issue here has been software systems. We have a bunch of software systems that turn out not to be particularly well suited to purpose, and in particular, the system that we have that is the association management system doesn't really do the things that we want. And so there have been efforts. We are pushing towards this. What we are doing is working to replace this system and to identify all of the issues that have been there with it. And not all of the community has been able to participate in this to the extent that we would like. So there's been a lot of drag on this, and it hasn't gone well. We have not selected a vendor. My anticipation is that there will be a short list probably in December. I think that what is most likely is that this goal is going to be missed this year, and I think it is going to be slipping into next year. I believe that that's the right trade-off, given the fact that we have not actually consulted very exhaustively with the people who are going to be affected by this. We did not do a good job of this the last time we selected this thing. Many of you will be aware that we only implemented Member Nova a couple of years ago, and it really did not go well. So, in facing the fact that some of these dates have not been working very well, and we have lost some staff who sort of left at inopportune times for us. So we've ended up in a situation where this hasn't worked very well. I feel that it would be better actually to extend some of these deadlines out than to meet the deadline but not have consulted with people. I think that it would be unwise to push ahead without adequate consultation. Next, please. The goal here really has to do, the goal of the focusing on content is to really work on how we deliver the content that we do. Much of the content that we produced historically was difficult to access. It was often hard to understand exactly how it fit together, and it was very difficult to understand why a given piece of content was up on the website or not, and how to reach it, and so on. We've made enormous progress, I think, on the website, and as you can see, the website, we've been going through the web content to make sure that it is relevant to our strategic objectives and the content strategy. So that's in pretty good shape, and I think that that's really going well. The audience satisfaction efforts, and particularly growing the audience satisfaction, we that won't really be done until the end of the year. So we don't have a lot to say about like what is the current audience satisfaction, but we'll know that later this year. Next, please. Another portion of what we were trying to do within the community was the expertise and capacity efforts, and this is really the investment in our training and learning platform and so on. And there's a designated fund that has been expended this year primarily around that. It's a significant investment. We made that decision last year, and we're seeing the results. Next, please. So many of these are exceeding their goals. We see, we aimed to have 30 of these opportunities available. We managed to get to 45 already. We were aiming to reach 10,000 people by Q3. We were up over 7,000, so I anticipate that we're probably going to meet that goal. We've been looking for high satisfaction rates among people. One of the issues with our prior training and education efforts was that there was pretty low satisfaction with the utility of those courses, and I'm very pleased to see this is quite high. This is 94% so far. We've got, in addition, you will recall that we were hopeful that the training and learning efforts would become self-sustaining, and so we needed to make sure that we had some people who are going to support it. We've already got we've already got one partner on board. We're hoping that we will meet this target of 2 by the end of the year. This is a difficult thing to get people right. I mean, essentially what they're doing is they're saying, yes, we're going to sponsor this program. So it will take some time. Next, please. We also have the fellowship programs that we were aiming to do. So there is a sort of training, which is a kind of broad-based sort of thing, and then the fellowships, which are really quite focused, right? The intention here is really to seed the world with people who are advocates for the Internet Society and for the internet. And so that's what these programs are about. We did launch the Early Career Fellowship, and we've got a baseline established for the number of applicants and so forth that we can do each year. We developed the mid-career plan, and it's actually now ready. And we've been trying to get partners to support the program. This is also a difficult area to go, and yet the team has managed to do it. They were aiming for 4; they've got 5 so far. So I think that we've really got a positive development in this area. I think that people really understand that we need advocates for the internet. Next, please. We wanted to continue our support of cutting edge knowledge, and in particular to support the Network and Distributed Security Symposium. We don't know yet where NDSS will be ranked this year, but we wanted to maintain it in the top 5, so we'll find out, of course, at the end of the year. And we've got some collaborations that we're working on with the research community and open standards. There was one that we were aiming to do. It appears that we're going to get there by the end of the year, but it isn't done yet. Next, please. We also have to worry about the Internet Society itself to make sure that the Internet Society is in a healthy financial condition. And of course, while we are very generously funded by PIR, we cannot be funded only by PIR. And so that is an important part of what this is about. But it's also the case that if we expanded our resources, we would be able to do more. Next, please. So the first thing here really was about diversification of revenue. We were hoping to get 50 agreements, memoranda of understanding, to various partners in order to indicate that we were going to get some support. We've got 56, so I think that's in good shape. We also were aiming for 10 new sources of funding for revenue diversification purposes. We've got 13, so that's also a positive thing. And then we had a $500,000 revenue target, and I know you're probably thinking, gee, $500,000 doesn't seem that much on our budget. Historically, we have been extremely bad at this part of our work, and so I'm very pleased to see the results here, that the team has managed to get $1.8 million as sort of revenue targets that that bring in outside support for the Internet Society. So that's really positive result. I see a hand from Richard.
Yeah, just a quick question on that revenue line. Do you have any thoughts on kind of what the key success factors were that enabled that wild success there?
Well, I think part of the answer is that people are seeing that the efforts that we set out to achieve a couple of years ago, when the board said, look, you've got to have some targets. And so we have been working on presenting targets that we can say to people, look, okay, here's what we said we were going to do. Now here it is that we're doing it. And we've been working very hard to make clear the benefits that we bring to these efforts. The effort around training and education, for instance, was an effort to say, okay, yeah, this program, it's underfunded, it's not very well designed. It really needs some work. We've put a lot of money into doing that, right? I mean, it's true that there's this income. It's not like that has helped our bottom line exactly, because the truth of the matter is we've also got a very, very expensive program there. But we've got a very expensive program that people see the value in. And I think that that is the key for the organization to continue building that, because I believe that we need to be able to show people, hey, the internet is really valuable and we're able to do something about it. And that's been the message that I think is carrying through. It's the informal information that I'm getting anyway. We don't have really good sort of hard numbers about this. And the reason we don't, of course, is because people who won't give you money won't give you information either. So we don't actually know why people weren't receptive to our message before, but it does appear to be working now.
Thank you.
Next, please. Oh, that's it. Right. So I hope that gives you, I know I went through that very quickly, but I was also sensitive that we started a little late. So I hope that that gives you a picture of the current state of affairs, and that it is satisfying. I want to say, I think the staff is really, delivering on what they said they were going to do. We have written down things in advance. We say, oh, this is what we're going to aim to do. And then people are actually turning up and doing that. And that's I think a very, very positive sign. I'm very, very grateful to all of the staff who've worked very hard to achieve this.
Thank you very much. Are there questions for Andrew? George?
Thank you. An observation more than a question. Andrew, thank you very much for this. I think it's a very good story that you're able to tell, and that's terrific. I would caution, however, against using the quantitative targets that you've used without considering some of the other external effects of what you're doing. It's sort of like when I read what's been written about this, when you set targets, I get the sense that this is a little bit like a box checking exercise, that if you've met your target, you've done what you want to do. And we have a case in the United States in schools, as you know, that when standardized tests are forced upon teachers and their performance is judged on the basis of how well students do, they teach to the test and not necessarily to the subject as they see it. For example, when I read that you want to establish 50 new community networks, that's very dry. It leaves me totally without passion for the task at all. Well, what's 50 more? How else could you use that money? Couldn't you get better leverage elsewhere? But when I hear you talk about it, and when I heard Jane talk about it, I had a half-an-hour conversation with Jane in which I said, "What are the alternatives? Why are you doing this?" She gave me a description that was full of nuance, full of pointers that something would cause something else, and something would test the regulatory capacities and the rules of a country. And I saw a picture which was very complex and which was instigated by the community networks, but would not come out in any quantitative measurement of what was being done. So I think that the qualitative aspects of each of these programs are very important, and I hope that they are recognized in some way in terms of whether we believe that we've achieved success in any particular dimension of the program. As I say, in general, Andrew, great job. In particular, let's make sure that we're aiming for the right goal, measuring ways in which we can decide correctly whether we're reaching our goal or not. Thank you.
I just want to point out.
Before you do, I had a side conversation with you, George, about this, where I suggested that if you weren't going to make this intervention, that you have a specific set of things that you suggested we measure instead. I'm sorry that you didn't have time to do that, but I would suggest that if you're going to bring up a way of changing how we measure success, that how we're going to measure it in some other system should be part of that, because I think fundamentally saying qualitative avoids the question, right? The real question is, how do we get something where more than one person would say, yep, we have set a target and we've reached it successfully. And I think the the quantitative measures that this board and its predecessor boards gave to Andrew were exactly because one of the things that was problematic in the Internet Society some years ago was people picked projects because they felt like they were achieving something and never measured to be sure that they did. So I'm happy to consider other things that we might measure, but I really do believe it's important for us to measure the output of the society in some way to determine whether or not it's succeeding.
Ed, if I might.
Absolutely, and then Richard, or sorry, then Andrew, and then Richard.
I'm not saying we shouldn't use quantitative targets, but we should understand that what we're doing is we're using a proxy in many cases for things that we can't measure. And those things may be as important in terms of deciding whether the activity has paid off for us as not. And second, I don't have a plan to measure, to aggregate qualitative measures at all, but I would hope that just the observation and understanding would be useful to bring up here. Thank you.
Richard?
I think I was probably going to agree with Ted here that we cannot not have quantitative measures, and they should be obviously aligned with a broader qualitative story, but we need both of those stories. So I think there's, like, as Ted said, if you know, we can't just say we cannot have quantitative measures. We need to get the right quantitative measures, but we need to have, you know, concrete measurements of our progress toward our ultimate goals.
Andrew, and then Luis.
So I want to remind everybody that every year we also produce an impact report, and that comes later after the end of the year when we look back. That came out this year, early in the year. It was, I think, March, and that report is designed, in fact, to capture all of those things. The part of the point of it is to try to, you know, capture, okay, here are the dry numbers. Yes, the dry numbers. And I agree, like, yeah, it's not, you know, for lots of people, oh, it's nice, you know, 15 networks, woohoo. And that is the feeling that some people take away from it. But, you know, then what we can do is say, okay, well, we achieved this. And by the way, here's the consequences of having all of that. So I would urge you to have a look at that from last year. You can expect a similar report coming next year. But of course, we can't do that in the middle of doing the work, because we're not done yet. And so, you know, I can't tell you the story about, like, this thing, except, you know, in cases, I mean, I have dozens of stories of, like, you know, tremendous effects that have happened, things that I have witnessed, things that I know that others have witnessed. We had an incredible number of people pouring out their hearts over Encryption Day this year. It was really inspiring. A huge number of people, chapters who, like, didn't contact us or anything like that, and they got totally excited about this. They went off, they set up an event. The day of the event, they called us up and they said, oh, by the way, we're participating too. And so this is, you know, but this is the kind of thing that I think we see in those sorts of retrospectives. And I think that's where you should look for those positive stories.
Thank you, Andrew. Luis, and then Pepper.
Thank you. I should stick to quantitative measures as complemented with the qualitative measures. Actually, when you look into community networks, it's more the qualitative data than the quantitative data, because the nature of the problem is qualitative. But I agree that we should add more quantitative in terms of comparison. It's very, very complicated to compare qualitative data. Yes, but quantitative lead us, if categories and scales are properly assigned, lead us to very fast and very objective information about the phenomena, or about the results we are trying to evaluate. Thank you.
Thank you, Pepper.
Building on what Luis just said, as an example of the quantitative in terms of the number of different projects, and community networks is a great example, as are the IXPs. But even within the community networks, within each one of those, there are also opportunities for quantitative metrics that are unique to that project. In other words, in a community network, as a result of that community network, how many people or schools or whatever got connected that were not connected previously. And again, those are qualitative. And George, when I talk, to Jane, those are the types of really compelling stories that actually are also quantitative. But so it's I think a false choice that it's either or. It's a combination, and I think we need both. So it's being able to measure the number of projects, for example, but then for each one of those, there's feedback and there's the results from each one of those projects, much of which can be and is quantitative, some of which are the kinds of things that Andrew talked about, which are more qualitative, and being able to talk about those in terms of each one of the projects, and highlighting some of the most impactful, I think is an additional good way to communicate the overall impact of ISOC. So again, it's not either or, it's a combination of things.
Great. Okay.
So we have Mohammed and myself in queue.
Thank you. Just a quick comment. Actually, Luis has very elaborately highlighted the issues with the qualitative and quantitative measures. And I see that as an organization, we want to grow and develop the internet where the quantitative measures and the quantitative results would be important. But as a social scientist, I tend to agree with what George has been saying, because these quantitative measures could be quite deceptive. And when you deal with the humans, actually it's the stories of the human that make and create impact. So I agree and second Rob Pepper when he says that we need both, not just one quantitative. Yes, it may be important, but qualitative dealing with the humans are somehow where we should be focusing more, though that could be quite difficult.
Thank you. Two quick points, and I will note that we are running tight on time, so we'll make a couple of adjustments here in a moment. One is, I think it's very important for us to think in terms of how we set goals and how the board has set goals with the executive in the past. And when we think about the assessment post facto, we may very well want to assess both quantitative measures and qualitative impact. But I believe we have to be very careful to allow the goals to be set in quantitative terms and the impact to be described. Because I think if we don't set the goals in quantitative terms, then setting a goal that says, everybody who interacts with ISOC should feel good about the internet at the end of it, that's a story, but it's not going to be measurable, and it's not going to be something where we know we've achieved success, and it's not going to be something where we actually are making much progress on our actual mission. So I think when I look at this and say, what are we trying to do here? We're trying to make sure that Andrew and his team have a solid set of goals that they can report to us on, and that inherently means quantitative measures in my point of view. Now, there's a lot of ways to take those goals and measure them, and as was pointed out by Pepper's intervention, one of those is to say, okay, maybe we don't want to count networks, maybe we want to count people, and maybe we actually want to count people in a way that recognizes that it's the underserved, to pick up Sarah's language, who need this more. And to say, we're going to actually aim to bring in people where we can identify them as chronically underserved, or where we can see that they would be part of the target group for skills or some other program as well. Those things are still quantitative, but there are ways in which we can measure or set goals to increase the impact. And I think we have to be very careful not to take those tools away from the executive unless we're willing to offer an equally powerful set of tools. tools. And that's why, George, when I asked you, I didn't say, don't do this. I said, please have a suggestion. That's still on the table. If you have a set of tools that will result in the same power, predictive and evaluative, then we should all listen. That's what we're here for. But I think we have to be careful to focus on both the goal side as well as on the evaluative side. George?
Oh, yeah, thanks. I don't want to be seen as an opponent of quantitative goals, but rather as recognizing that there's more to it than that, and that figures in. For example, if you wanted to count individuals, I would argue that if you could get 4 country presidents to get really enthusiastic about something that we were arguing for, that would be better than 10,000 other people. And so this is not a homogeneous commodity that we are counting. I think both are important, and recognizing the nuances and the fact that both are important is what's really sufficient at this point.
Okay, so
That's it.
let's continue this conversation offline. But I think the reason you think they're different is because there's in fact some impact difference between those 10,000 and those 4.
Absolutely.
And what we would really set the goal is for the impact, and we would measure that quantitatively, right? And that would be the way we would square this particular circle. But I note in time-wise, it's now 4:56. We have the folks joining us, if I'm correct, in 10 minutes. Is that right? 10 minutes after the hour?
12:10 at 10. I'm sorry, 10 minutes past the hour.
At 10 minutes past the hour. That's not going to give enough time for Say's report. Say, is it all right if we move your reports to after the PIR? Okay, I apologize for that, but this is an important conversation to have. That does still allow us to do the other one, which is relatively short, call for nominations and timetable. Richard?
Thanks, Ted. So yeah, this is, we are running the nominations process for the PIR board as we do every year. The first step in that is for this board to approve the call for nominations and the overall timetable. The PIR nominations committee has reviewed these and we recommend this call for nominations and timetable to the board. Presenting it now for approval. For those of you who are involved in the process last year, you'll notice this is largely the same. I think the only change we did besides updating the dates was to add a paragraph about conflict of interest, just to be very clear that folks need to be forthcoming about real or potential conflicts. That's the only change of any note that was made to the call for nominations. And then the timeline has us having the call for nominations open basically from after this meeting until the early part of 2022. And then we'll do interviews and our selection process culminating in a vote on the slate at the Q1 meeting on the 26th of March. So that's the proposal.
Just one quick question on this. Then the intent would be for the new folks to take up their seats at the general meeting in the summer. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
So this schedule, I believe, is a bit more in advance of it's a few weeks, ends a few weeks earlier than last year's schedule did. So there's a bit more time there for transition.
That certainly seems valuable. Are there questions for Richard or for the PIR NomCom committee?
Okay.
Do you want to read the proposed resolution?
Sure. I will. So the proposed resolution is resolved that the call for nominations for the PIR board as presented and the following timetable for the 2022 appointment process are both approved.
Could I have someone to move the resolution, please?
I'm happy to move.
Okay. I actually saw Brian and Laura before you, so
Oh, well.
the disadvantage of reading it, you're a little behind. Can we seek assent using the tool, please? If you assent to the resolution, please raise your hand. And Mike, it seems that you do not assent. Can I ask what your objection is?
Mike isn't.
Mike, you may be muted.
Mike may not be there.
Sorry. I was just, I was actually washing dishes while listening to this meeting, but I'm up. My hand.
Your hands are, your hand is up. Okay, so thank you. That gives us unanimous consent and the resolution is approved.
Thank you all.
And I think the next thing is we need to move into the closed session in order to meet Lisa and John there. So we'll close this session. For those of you who are attending it, either synchronously or asynchronously, there will be an open session at the end that will include both some resolutions and the presentation by the interim CFO. Thank you very much, and we'll see you in a few minutes. Thanks, everybody. We're now back in open session, and the next item on our agenda is the report by the acting CFO.
Thank you, Ted. Kevin, I think you have a slide deck for me as well. Thank you. I realized that I should have introduced myself. Sorry, apologize. My name is Say Park. I am filling in for Sandy today. It's been very difficult time for us, especially for finance team, but I am honored and grateful for the opportunity and the trust that you have put in me and the rest of finance team to carry forward this critical role for both ISAC and Foundation. So thank you. Moving along, so today, this is to give you financial update for ISAC through the end of September. As similar to Foundation, since all the detailed reports have been shared with you already, I'll go ahead and just cover just the highlights of ISAC results. So next slide. So at the high level, overall, the revenue for ISAC is under budget by about 318,000. If you look at the ISAC generated line only, we're under by about 9.9%. On the expenses side, we're under by 2 million, and that's about 6.9% underspent budget, underspent from the budget. These percentage, although you see them that we've been reported number of years that we are underspent, actually we are making progress in reducing that variances. And I wanted to show you some data to support that, and that's on slide 3. Next slide. Thank you. So I just wanted to put in the percentage we are away from our budget at the same time from 2019, 2020, and 2021. So on the ISAC revenue generated side, we're much closer to our budget at the same time compared to 2019. On the program side, it's a little tricky because 2019, we didn't group our program by action plan projects and initiatives. So they were in one big focus area, one group. So it's hard to compare, and especially with program in 2020, our program expenses or our program budget still had lots of travel, lots of in-person meetings in the budget, which we couldn't make it happen in 2020, as you all know. That's why that variance was really high in 2020. But even if we compare 2021 numbers back to 2019, we are still making a progress in 2021, making it very closer to our budget. The big progress that we're making is definitely in the personnel and operating. That consistently show an improvement of reducing our variance. Board of Trustees, your budget, we were being optimistic and we kept the in-person meeting budget for 2021 as well. That's why you see that line going opposite way. The variance is higher this year compared to 2020. Next slide, please. Actually, slide number 5, sorry. So ISAC revenue, ISAC generated revenue is below budget. The biggest difference is coming from the grants and contribution side, which is under by about 131.9 thousand. And that's mainly due to the Facebook grant. As you know, the Facebook grant is a restricted or donor advised grant for a specific purpose. So we are able to release restriction of these revenue as we incur expenses for that Facebook grant. So because we were underspent in the Facebook grant, we're also showing an under budget on the revenue side for grant and contributions here. The next big variances is coming from meetings and sponsorship. And that's under by about 105,000 at the end of third quarter. But as explained previously, we have very successful Global Encryption Day, as well as the fundraising perspective as well. So we are actually anticipating that we will surpass our budget at the end of the year. And the org members and individual donations, we're being optimistic, and we think that we'll be able to meet our mid-year forecast targets for that as well. Slide number 7, please, Kevin. These are the action plan projects. We are underspent by about 21.7% through the end of third quarter. We are experiencing the continued impact of the global pandemic in our program, our work plan. They've been very agile with their work plan and quickly pivoted to their backup plans. But they're also learning that our backup plans of such as having virtual events are costing less than their original plan. So we are seeing some underspend in this area. And the biggest variances is coming from the fostering in infrastructure technical communities, because that houses the Facebook grant. Going to initiative, so slide 9. This whole group is actually overspent compared to our budget, mainly because we had these unbudgeted contributions to NSRC and Afrinic through the end of September. The biggest underspent gap is coming from the external engagement team or their programs. It is because originally they budgeted some in-person events. They were being optimistic for the second half of the year, but that's not going to happen. So they see a big underspend in that area. Moving to personnel. Our personnel, we are very close to our budget. We are underspent by about 3.8%. Or 614.8 thousand, and most of the underspend is coming from the Office of Resource and Skill Management. They had a number of staff moving to other departments in the organization, as well as some of the positions were filled at lower cost. And next slide. As you know, starting 2020, we have worked on this allocation process where we look at and capture our staff's time and effort that they put it into our various different functions at the organization. And we are presenting these numbers of where our personnel resources are spent. And by far, the action plan projects plus the project operations, those are our highest spent of our personnel. And then the next slide is we took a step further and then took that total of action plan projects personnel costs, allocated that out to the 6 projects that we have, and added their direct expenses to give you the total costs of individual projects that we run. And then the next slide is we took the same personnel cost allocation that we had done back in slide 12 and applied that to organization as a whole. So taking that 77%, the big portion of our expenses, and allocating that out to various functions that we have, we can now tell really how much of our total expenses that we're devoting to our program. So the action plan projects takes up about 31% of our total expenses, and initiatives are taking about 21% as a total. Of course, there are probably lots of expenses in that 25% business operations that we could easily allocate or tie as program-related activities. We do that for the audit side, but this is just to give you a general sense. Okay, so next slide is number 16. This is to give you a general sense of where our operating expenses are spent by the natural expense accounts. And most of our expenses, direct expenses or non-personnel expenses, are spent on professional services. And next one up is the office and other internal expenses. The big variances is coming from the office and other internal expenses. That category houses all of our license fees and subscriptions fees for all of our systems and softwares that we maintain. And there was a little difference in the budgeting. You know, they budgeted on the cash basis rather than GAAP. And that's causing that variance rather than true underspent in that category. Moving along to slide 18, please, Kevin. This is to look at our temporary restricted or donor advised funds. As you can see, we have received a new Truist or the second Truist grant in 2021 of 1.5 million. That's going to stay in restricted fund until we incur expenses for that grant. Next one is page 20, is the board designated fund. This is the update on the balances on how we're doing. We have few funds that we're going to exhaust by the end of the year, and those funds will be part of our program budget in 2022. And to look at the cash and investment of 30.66 million of our cash and investment, majority of that funding is sitting in with Goldman Sachs as our investment account for continuity fund, 23.6 million of it. And we have about 1.5 million reserved for our temporary restricted or donor advised fund. And 5.5 million is available for our operating cost. And I believe that's it.
Thank you very much for the report. Are there questions for Say? Well, then let me repeat a comment from the chat. Andrew pointed out in the chat that this was a big lift for the finance group to be able to produce a report with these allocations. And it really is very nice to be able to see these and the expenses shown allocated in the way you have this time. So I wanted to extend our thanks for that. And it looks like Richard is in queue.
I was just going to yes and that a little bit. The slide you had say comparing performance for the last couple of years, I thought that was a really useful perspective to kind of understand how our financial performance is evolving over time.
Okay, if there are no other questions or comments, thank you again for producing the report. It was very useful. And I think we have one more item of business that we need to do today, which is to approve the PIR budget. Let me just pull that up. So the proposed resolution is resolve the Internet Society Board hereby approves the 2022 budget of the Public Interest Registry as presented. Is there any discussion on this point? May I ask for someone to move and second? I saw Brian and Pepper. Please signify assent by raising your hand in the tool. Okay, I believe we have unanimous consent for that. Thank you very much to everybody. Is there anything else for the good of the order? Hearing nothing, we stand adjourned until tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your day, evening, or morning, as it may be. See you tomorrow.